Hello and welcome to the Australian Entrepreneurs set of podcasts under the Talking Leadership banner. Thanks again for joining me. Hope you enjoy today's content. By way of introduction, my guest today is the Director Consultant of Glowing Green Australia and has been in that role for more than 8 years. Can I welcome to the podcast Larissa Rose? How are you, Larissa?
Fantastic, Eric. Thank you so much for igniting a conversation and allowing me to be a part of it.
Great. It's good to have you here, and I've got a lot of questions to throw your way. So let's start at the beginning, I guess. Can you give me a bit of a breakdown as to your pathway that you took to become an entrepreneur? What got you to that point, Larissa?
Learning how to crawl through the trenches on gravel. I've been in the environment space for nearly not far from about 15 years now. Understood that I really wanted to drive forward my own business model and shape that up. And I think that really was around me kind of knowing I needed to take leadership and do my own thing and not actually work for anyone else. And that was purely driven a lot to do with, having 3 kids and progressing in the 3rd child, and really wanted to not work for anyone anymore and consult and do my own business model. So that was the key driver to create Glowing Green Australia, which I created in my master's economics class, and literally logged on to ASIC and registered my name and went, okay, well, I'm going to register my business name. So that means I've got to be accountable now. So that's funnily enough how that came about. And then I just started driving and getting projects. So that was the pathway for the beginning. And then from there, I probably went in really blind, not with any amazing strategy or business plan or concept. I just knew I just needed to get projects and I just needed to get work and I just needed to build on whatever my capabilities were, and just was quite relaxed and simple about that. And then obviously understanding that there's probably some other more strategic elements that you need to being an entrepreneur and building, more strategies than kind of just going out there and winging it. And I guess that's a part of an ever-evolving journey over the last 10 to 11 years now that Glowing Green Australia has been around to work that thing out. So that's some of the pathway, which I'm sure we'll explore more of that pathway.
Yeah, so and I have a lot of questions already, but I'll try and stick to the script as much as I can. Setting up the business, and again, you've noted that you did that through your master studies, and more power to you for doing that. I think that's an exceptionally good recognition that those kinds of educational pathways can lead you to something bigger and better, particularly if you want to be an entrepreneur and work for yourself. And it sounds like you had that in mind very early on. Can you perhaps give me a bit of a distinction, if there is one, between leaders and entrepreneurs? So you've got staff, obviously, and you've worked with people. Do you see a difference between the two, or are they much the same, or is it something else?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, what does that mean for me? I feel like entrepreneurship, I feel like you already have a set of skills embedded in you. Like it's just naturally involved in you. If we're branding yourself as an entrepreneur, I mean, obviously that grows and gets more valuable, that skill set. But I think an entrepreneur already sort of has a skill set. I've always seen a leader as just being probably a little bit more like I was, on having intentionality, wanting to do something, maybe not so much strategies or skills inside that, but just sort of a sense of knowing this is where we're going and being able to take the team and build the tribe around you and build that agenda to grow. So I think that's probably the best way that I could differentiate the difference between those two, because it can be kind of a grey area and they can get quite mashed over a fair bit. But for me, that's really what it is. I sort of see leaders as maybe a little bit like I spoke about just before, a little bit like I was just like running through the forest, just going for it, building the business, and not going, oh, I'm bumping up towards a tree and going, oh, wow, I just realized that I probably might need a bit of a centrical focus on a strategy. Whereas an entrepreneur, if they're already got that wiring there, I think those kind of fundamental core frameworks are already instilled to some degree.
It's an interesting, almost, what would you call it, a timeline, or almost like a continuum. That's the word I'm looking forward to. I'll try to access my English language skills here. So it sounds like the leadership and entrepreneurs are on a continuum, and that there are some differences but some similarities, just like you said. And to be fair, some of the previous podcasts that I've had around this, people have brought up that same issue, that there's potentially a blurring of lines, and some people have never used the entrepreneur moniker to nominate that that's what they do, versus yourself, who's very comfortable with that term in terms of your own business. So given what you said before, Larissa, and I'm interested in asking you this question, what's been the most difficult part about being an entrepreneur? And now I don't ask that to be, it's not a a throwaway question. I think it's important here because you did say that when you started out, just went in bull at a gate and then maybe thought about strategy and other things down the track, but just wanted to get started. Was difficulty in the startup bit, or was it difficulties you found as an entrepreneur down the track?
When you asked me that question, the first thing that sort of came to me was the most difficult part has been learning to feel the fear and do it anyway, which is a massive drop line that I say quite a lot because it's consistently always a needing to work on that. And just to help pull that out across, I think in the first phase of like, okay, I'm going to do a business and I'm going to get that going and I'm going to have my own, company, you've got a lot of like momentum, and I guess you've got, what do you call it? Like maybe a lot of hot air, vapor going around it. But then when you start getting your feet to the ground of the road and you're actually starting to get to the cogs and the grinding elements and you come down onto the ground and get level pegged, you have to understand that you're going to have to make lots of thoughts and decisions. And like I found a lot, I had to really work on my courage to go, whether that attached to that is like self-worth or value, do I deserve to have a business that's doing this, or do I deserve to have that? And if you do believe in that, then you have to have the courage to feel that and feel the fear and go anyway, because you might not believe in yourself. So I think that's, I don't know if the word difficult could be attached to it, but it's definitely something for me that always need to keep working on. And even though my persona might show that I feel really confident and I've got the capacity to be able to do things, I've got ideas and concepts and I'm all excitable, I still totally feel like I might be crawling through the trenches sometimes with stuff, or not feel super courageous and really feel that fear and have to go, well, am I either going to jump or am I just going to stay still? And if I want to drive leadership, the traits of leadership is to keep progressing and moving forward and try and work on whatever those attribute components are that I might need to do to grow and expand and evolve, so the fear doesn't get me so much, whether it's financial or making a decision or employing someone, all those kind of things. We all feel fear attached to that.
Measuring success. How do you measure success?
Dang. My big one for success, my metric for measuring that really would be built on your capacity to expand, your growth mindset, fully knowing and owning yourself and your ability to, expand in those areas that are needed, because if you don't do the work on your growth and your personality, or dealing with default pre-programmed behaviors or reactiveness or whatever you've got attached, you really can't. You can fundamentally expand and grow a business for sure and still have a badass attitude and be preconditioned from past model behavior your parents embedded in you, for sure. But I don't think you can be a leader if you still can't work on that expansion and that growth mindset stuff.
So growth being one measure, how do you, or do you think about, it's probably a better question, measuring success in terms of your progression of your staff? And by growing the business, do you include your staff and growing opportunities for them? Like, I'm just trying to think that in your business, you did mention you had staff. How do they figure in that? Because it sounds to me that you hold yourself ultimately accountable for what it is that you do. And that's a refreshing thing to hear. But obviously, given what you said before, that you've got staff. So how do they play into what you do as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I have a really great example that I've just really grown and expanded in of lately. And that's been around, obviously, as a business owner. This is your holy grail and it's your ship, and you've got to keep it afloat, for many reasons, whether it's like food on the table, whether you've got pride or ego attached to it, whatever you want to do, you want to keep this business and the ship afloat and provide, value for your clients and in your audience. But the big part for me where I was like, wow, I actually have really grown and expanded, and I am succeeding, because it's very important not to attach success to finances. So I've actually got two transparent revelations that can come out of this, which I think it's so important when you listen to a podcast. One was my ability to let go of portfolios and sector, like little parts of my business model. Big one for me, wanting to have my thoughts, and not that it's a controlling aspect, but in the sense of thinking that someone doesn't really fully understand the capabilities and I fully get it, and not letting go to understand. To full leadership is allowing someone to take that space. So I've actually started to let go and have a role in my leadership to instill confidence, to leave them to go and manage a sector. I've got a part of my sustainability education service in our provision of services. And in my sustainability educator manager, I just am pretty much like, okay, well, you know what? I'm just going to give you an intern and you guys go for it. It's yours. Whereas last year, I probably would have wanted to put my nose in it more because it's a grant. So I'm pretty much just letting go to go, you know what? It is what it is. If it's meant to be ours, we will get it. This is a perfect opportunity for my staff to be able to learn and evolve from doing this grant writing process and delivering on a project, and them growing, learning how to work with an intern and instilling confidence in an intern and giving an intern a project opportunity. There's so much more value that comes out of that, gauging that metric of success off that. And then I was like, wow, I've really expanded in that. I have been doing the last year a lot of work with a mindset growth mentor, because I know that if I want to evolve the business and grow it to where I need to get to, I probably might need to work on some of the barriers that are doing me, attached to me. And one of those was, I've done all this rad stuff, okay? And not to blow hot air, but I've worked really, really hard. I've pushed through fear. I've done some stuff. Sometimes I set these really funky goals and then I'm like, oh my God, man, I totally did that. And that's just come into my hands, and I'm really grateful and love that part of my persona that I will push the envelope and great things will come my way. But I actually the other month when this happened, and I got more clarity the other day, was, man, for so many years I've put success, I've attached that to money. Why have I been so bloody hard on myself? I've done this, I've done that, I've done all this reflection work on, I've spoken here, I've done that, I've pushed that, I've assisted with that, I've built this team, I've been able to do that, I've stood on the stage here. And just to stop and pause, and I looked at it and I just went, why do I think that I haven't succeeded? Because, I haven't built a, $2 million business. Well, that's pretty dumb. That's not nice to myself, and I just realized that a little bit of that pre-programmed behavior was attached to what is success. And that's where I'd be able to answer that very different for you, saying it's around growth and mindset and your capacity to be able to expand.
Success can be a loaded word, I guess, that if success is always meant a monetary payoff, then if you don't achieve that, then are you still not successful under other metrics? Another entrepreneur that I spoke to said that in his mindset that it's about profit and people. So there were two elements to his journey, that it's about getting the business going, but it's also about the people that you work with. And I think where you've expanded that and given me and the listeners, obviously, another way to look at this thing called leadership around entrepreneurialism is the ability to look at the whole picture and pick out the bits that make you succeed without creating some roadblocks. And I guess in your world, and I'm saying what I'm going to say now from an outsider's perspective, is that there are probably an immeasurable amount of things that you could put up to say this will be a roadblock to me succeeding. Being able to push through and, like you said, own the fear and let the fear drive you a bit, that's a big step, and a lot of people wouldn't do it. And I've got to say, me in my leadership journey, I would never take that risk, because that's not the way that I'm hardwired. So can I take you to a different place here and talk to you about entrepreneurial capabilities? And I'll use your experiences, if I can, to ask the following. What do you believe are the core capabilities that an entrepreneur needs to be effective as well as successful?
I really, truly do believe that one that I just mentioned earlier, a core capability is to be able to feel the fear and do it anyway, just to some leveling degree, I guess. Other capabilities really are being able to think solution orientated. Yeah, that's an ever expanding one that filters into your staff. If you've got a exponential thinking and that long-term trajectory vision. But another capability is just really identifying that intentional, purposeful impact of what you are doing. I think that's a strong capability, a set of skills that you definitely need to have as an entrepreneur.
Larissa, let me ask you a couple more questions here. And these are some statements that I'm really keen to get your feedback on. Entrepreneurs are risk takers.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one. I feel like they're not as much risk takers.
Is it about taking calculated risk?
Yeah, because you can break that down a little bit. Yeah, so calculated risk, because, like leaders, so risk takers. So leaders do have a lot of courage, I think. So if I look at it from that perspective, so leaders have a lot of courage to take their team and their business into new terrain. So if I feel and think like that, then I think that maybe entrepreneurs aren't as much risk takers. But then again, I feel like I might be contradicting myself on that one.
Entrepreneurs are persistent.
I feel, entrepreneurs do have a persistency just within their wiring. They're adamant, that functionality. Yeah, it's an adamant persistence. Yeah.
Entrepreneurs are innovators.
I would concur. Yes, they are. I think they really understand the core component of a business and the need for expansion and growth. So they do think solution oriented, and they do need to think outside the box, because the way that they're wired to some degree, not all of them, but is around growing the business and expanding it and building new systems and creating new products, all that. So I really do think entrepreneurs are. I think they can identify the gaps.
Entrepreneurs are strategic thinkers.
Yeah, they are. So are leaders, though, but leaders probably do it in a lot different way. They might do it a little bit more delicately. Entrepreneurs are very strategic, absolutely. And clearly that was a deficit for me when I spoke about earlier. I was sort of being a leader. It was a little bit more like, I kind of know my intention, but I'll just go with it. Whereas an entrepreneur was like, nah, it's strategic. This is happening. This is the goal. This is what we're going to achieve by the end of the quarter 2020, that sort of stuff. Because it depends on personalities and personas as well.
Let me ask you something before I end this bit of it, because you've used the word persona quite a few times. And do you believe that the way your business is and its structure and what it does, the fibre of its being, is a reflection of you? It's a mirror of you. It's you in that business, or it's something different? When you're talking about building the business, and you did mention before, and for those listening, you must be an attentive listener when you're a podcast host, that you did mention that you walked away and sort of cut some strings and didn't want to stick your nose into the business, just let your team run with something, and you trusted in them to do that. So how much of you was really invested in the business, as in your personality?
Oh, I love this, Eric, because I have actually found it challenging at times to, probably from a branding and corporate, perspective of Glowing Green Australia, has been, does my persona, is it detrimental to Glowing Green Australia? Is Glowing Green Australia to Larissa bandwagon, the sideshow, and not clear, crisp cut, and it looks like a full functioning beast of its own, which is Glowing Green Australia, not laced with the Larissa Rose persona, tainted all over it, So I actually have struggled with that a little bit at times, going, how am I perceived? Like my personality, does it look like just the Larissa sideshow kind of thing? Even though I've got like a team of people that work for me and stuff, but is it, or is it not seem like that?
What's that biggest goal for you?
It is ever changing. There's so many parts. We could probably just have a podcast on that discussion piece, because I've always thought, well, is it detrimental that I'm seen as the spearhead? Like I'm the front end of it. Like, understand as being an industry body association, you're the CEO or the managing director of an industry body. So you're the face attached to that. And definitely if you're a director or a CEO or the, manager of your company, you have that. But for me, I feel like it's been me, and I've been dragging Glowing Green Australia with me. Like that's my carriage, and Larissa's the one. And then you meet Larissa, and then, Glowing Green Australia, like the cart's there. So these are all the services and what we can do in our capabilities. And by the way, I've also got this deck of cards that I do, and I've also got this one. And then I've also thought, well, is that bad that is like that? Like, is it too much? If I'm going to grow and expand in scale and be more corporate and get into bigger, tenders and jobs and stuff like that, I've found conflicted if that is detrimental to my business, because they might just think it's the Larissa bandwagon show.
I really do appreciate you sharing this with me on a podcast. I think you've been potentially a tad too harsh on yourself. I mean, think of it this way. So Richard Branson is the head of his business empire, and he wouldn't give it a second thought. I'm trying to think some really successful people here in the world. Please forgive me, but I've forgotten the Prime Minister of New Zealand. She is
Jacinta.
Yeah, she is the brand for a country. So it's because of the way that they're doing her job. And And so I don't think there's any detriment in that at all. I guess from a human perspective, if you're going to do that for 3 and 4 and 5 businesses, you're going to wear yourself out, and then that's not going to be good for any of them. So at what point, and here's the critical question, when do you cut the umbilical cord metaphorically to some of those businesses and let others run them still with your vision there, but to allow you to do other things? And I think maybe that's the crossroads that you're at. Now, I know I'm not speaking for your business. I don't know your business as intimately as you do, but from what I'm hearing, maybe that's one of the crossroads that lots of entrepreneurs have to hit at some point to go, yeah, when do I let the baby grow up a bit so that I can do other things? Because by the sounds of it, you probably do 100 different things. And so putting all your effort into one thing may not be the best thing for you longer term, because you've got other goals you want to achieve. Maybe, I don't know. Is that's
been a lot of that, probably work over the last couple of years, and question asking on myself around, well, what is it? What is Glowing Green Australia from a, more outside perspective? And what is the great value adding elements around myself being the horse with the cart behind? What is instead of looking at it, because we can all be really super negative Nancy on ourselves, and I definitely have a tendency to do that. I'm a bit of a hard master on myself, but I value it because it's got me to where I need to get to as well. But at times I need to tone it, down big time and flick that monkey off. But that whispers in my ear a lot sometimes. But I've actually put a lot of centrical focus on the valuable parts of driving a business model like that, because I have obviously that thought leadership component. That's definitely a long-term trajectory goal, and a goal that runs parallel alongside whether I'm wearing the biofuels, renewable fuels hat, or I'm Larissa Rose from Glowing Green Australia, is that I definitely have that. And that's actually an integral component to the growth and scale of Glowing Green Australia. So I've sort of done that whole 180 thinking concept mapping out. And out of that, you've got to clear your own pre-programmed attitudes and behaviors that sit along that. Because sometimes these little monkeys that come up is just your own funky headspace.
We're all human beings though. And that it never goes away. I think that the stuff you learn when you're very young is hard to get rid of, because we are hardwired in certain ways. And I always think of it as the path of least resistance. When you go back to saying what's the easiest pathway to get out of a problem, the human inclination is not to make your life more difficult than it absolutely needs to be. And I guess this is what delineates an entrepreneur from any other leader, is that you and your ilk, you and your kind out there, those entrepreneurial type, you're more prepared to wear the consequences of that than those that don't. And I think that's where maybe the key difference is. Larissa, let me ask you this, and this has come up in all the forms of podcasting I've done around the topic of leadership, and that's mentoring. Mentoring seems to be a key component of most of the a part of the more effective leaders that I've spoken to in my travels, that all have mentioned at one point or another they've had a mentor in their pathway to being a leader or being an entrepreneur. How important is it in the space that you play, that the entrepreneurial space, to have mentors in your life?
Oh, it's imperative. It's a non-negotiable, and I'm steadfast with conviction. And your audience will probably get to see and know that more as they find out who I am. Is that my ethos is around building the leaders of the future, and what's attached to that is my conviction to ensure that I'm being the best mentor and leader and driver to support the growth and expansion of my industry and sector, but also help instill confidence in a lot of the interns that I take and students to take that progressive step and to feel the fear and do it anyway. So it's my thing.
Brilliant. It's nice to hear that is part of your DNA when it comes to mentoring, is that you want to progress leaders in your industry. So let me ask you, and this is a fairly new question that I've wanting to pose in a podcast at some point. So I'm going to start with this one. So here's the inaugural question. In your industry, do you believe that there are fit for future leaders in your industry at the moment, or is there more to do to get those fit for future leaders identified and trained and developed?
A clear word that associates with that mentoring and growing that leadership is a duty of care that we all have in some way, shape or form to support and to lead. We may not be a natural leader, but we all have the capacity to be able to add value and help build leadership. And I guess a lot of what I've noticed over the last few years, Glowing Green Australia have taken on a fair few interns, predominantly over the last 3 years. Obviously, you notice the skill set gap between coursework university and in an industry. So there's always that gap there, and that's always going to be there to some shape or form. And internships definitely shine a light on that and make the students realise where they might need to level up. But there's this other yummy thing that comes out of Eric, out of all the interns that I've noticed and the mentoring I do, which has got a lot of holistic philosophy to it as well. Then here's an environment report, you need to write it, you need to write legislation, and that's it. Is this other skill set around knowing and owning yourself, whatever way that is and how that looks, whether that's you're not kind of happy, but you just got to be content, and then having a real clear agenda and an idea on where you want to go to and what that is and what that means, and being able to map that out. So that sort of soft skill set, which is, I guess, the 101 of just personal development stuff. Most of the time, that's about 50% of the mentoring that I do with the interns is just, we've got to understand there's people out there that may not have had leadership model to them in their family environment, or whether that their guardians or whatever, that village around them.
Yep.
So that learning to, sometimes I've got interns that are like, I've never mapped out any directional focus. So intentional of what a goal is, whether it's something quite simple like we need to deliver a podcast project in 8 weeks' time. All right, well, I want to have, my goal by the end of 2020 is to have met 20 key people in the industry and sector. Okay, so if that's your goal, let's back map that out and work out what that is and what that means in terms to every month, what that means every week, and what that means intentionally every day that you need to do to make sure you can achieve that goal. Sometimes students don't even know that, but understanding underneath that intention, like, why is that meaningful for me? Why would I be doing that? So when you're really clear on that intention and purpose, the conviction to want to do it and to make it happen just flows naturally. That's the fun little piece that I find needs a lot more growth in driving leadership.
Oh, that's brilliant. Look, that is a very positive way to end the podcast. Larissa, I do appreciate your time. Thank you. I know you're busy, and from this podcast, I definitely know that giving up your time is very much appreciated from me. So thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely. Every conversation helps you expand, doesn't it?
Thank you. So for those listening, I've been speaking with Larissa Rose. She is the Director Consultant of Glowing Green Australia. And for those listening, thank you for following me on the podcast, and I'll catch you all next time. Thanks again, Larissa.
You're welcome. Thanks, Eric.